It is a cold, snowy spring in Dromure, Scotland, about an hour northwest of Aberdeen. But it's lambing time, and sheep farmer Mel has 800 ewes ready to give birth over the next 4 weeks. As shown on the documentary TV series This Farming Life, Mel and her fiancé Martin live 4 miles away from their farm, and someone has to check on the sheep every 2 hours. So they've parked a camper van in the barn to sleep there, as much as they can sleep. Halfway through lambing, Mel is nearly staggering with fatigue. Dark circles ring her eyes. The greatest burden is the pet lambs, whose mothers don't have enough milk and have rejected their newborns. Pet lambs have to be kept warm with heat lamps and bottle-fed 4 times a day for 6 weeks. With a couple dozen pet lambs, that means Mel is pretty much always mixing formula and holding bottles. It snows again on Easter morning, and Martin wants to let Mel sleep, but a shivering, severely dehydrated newborn lamb needs help right away. Mel drags herself out of bed, so tired she's barely able to speak. Martin warns her the little guy has only a 20% chance of survival, but Mel still tries to save him. This lamb is too weak to suck from a bottle, so Mel syringes formula into him, wraps him up well, and puts him in the warm camper van to rest. Then she goes out to check on the rest of the sheep. It may be Easter, but it's another day on the farm for a shepherd. John is the gospel where a wide-angle lens pays off. John doesn't tell any part of Jesus' story in a few sentences. He'll take an entire chapter, or 2 or 3, to give us a complex, nuanced picture. When we zoom in to focus on 8 or 10 verses, the length of a typical Sunday gospel reading, we miss the context that tells us what John is up to in those 8 or 10 verses. So let's switch to that wide angle to explore the Good Shepherd within the context of the Gospel of John. We just heard a chunk of chapter 10. Chapter 9 of John begins with a man born blind. This man is on the outside of society. People assume his blindness is punishment for sin, his own or the sin of his parents. So they ostracize him and leave him to beg in the streets. He's a sheep who has been pushed out of the flock. On his own, he's vulnerable to the next hungry wolf to come along. Jesus heals this man. He spits on the ground, makes mud, spreads it on the man's eyes, and tells him to go and wash in the pool of Siloam. The man does and comes back able to see, able to join the flock. The neighbors are curious, disbelieving, astonished. They keep asking, "But how were your eyes opened?" He says, "The man called Jesus made mud, spread it on my eyes, and told me to wash. I washed, and now I see." The neighbors are still skeptical. They bring this man to the Jewish leadership. Now, Jesus and the Jewish leadership have been at odds since the beginning of Jesus' ministry. Jesus has been challenging the leaders' power, and they suspect that he is not really from God. And the leaders question the man who's been healed aggressively. They bring in his parents and question them. Then the leaders bring the healed man back for more interrogation. It's almost as though he is on trial for being healed. The leaders don't like the answers the man gives. He seems to be sympathetic to Jesus, and no wonder, Jesus did heal him. So they throw him out. He's driven out of the flock again. Jesus hears that he's been thrown out, and Jesus goes out to look for him. When he finds the man, Jesus reveals that he is the Son of Man, God in human flesh, and the man becomes his disciple. Jesus has brought this sheep back into the fold, and no one can push him out ever again. Some of the leaders who witness this ask Jesus what's going on. And it is then that Jesus says, "I am the good shepherd." That's the context. Jesus has gone out to find a sheep that has been separated from the flock and brought him safely back into the fold. Then Jesus explains why he has done it. He is the good shepherd. The good shepherd protects the sheep at the cost of his life. He stays with the sheep even when wolves are threatening to attack. The good shepherd knows the sheep. He knows who's likely to get lost, who's at risk of being pushed out. He knows when one sheep is missing. When a sheep is isolated from the others, because either it has wandered away or the other sheep have driven it off, the good shepherd goes out to find that sheep and bring it home. The good shepherd has many sheep. Some of them don't belong to this fold. He has to bring them too, so there will be one flock protected and cared for by one shepherd. This is why Jesus has come into the world, that the sheep may have life and have it abundantly. The man born blind hears the voice of the good shepherd. At first, when he's begging in the street, he cannot see Jesus, but he hears Jesus' voice. And he knows Jesus, as Jesus knows him. To know Jesus and be known is to abide in Jesus, to be in relationship with him. The man claims this relationship with Jesus when he testifies to the leadership in defense of Jesus, and again when he becomes Jesus' disciple. Abiding in Jesus is not abiding with only Jesus, but becoming one of Jesus' flock, abiding with the other sheep and being in relationship with them. This man who had to fend for himself all these years now has a community, people to love him and look out for him, and for him to love and look out for in return. He knows what it's like to be pushed out of the flock. He won't let the other sheep do that to anyone else. Instead of isolation and loneliness, this man is now embedded in a web of relationships. This is abundant life. Community, purpose, interdependence, knowing and being known. This man has received what Jesus came to bring. We live in divisive times, dear ones. Human beings have a natural tendency toward tribalism, to split up into us and them. And powerful forces in our culture want us to be disunited. I've been both one of the flock that closes ranks against someone else and a sheep who's been pushed out, and maybe you have been too. Even when the relationships are so poisonous that a clean break is the only path forward, it's a pretty awful place to be. It hurts to be cut off from others. It violates our natural need for companionship. But everywhere people are pushed out, the Good Shepherd brings them back in. He knows who's most vulnerable, who gets distracted and left behind when the flock moves, who's at risk of being isolated. The Good Shepherd goes out in the wind and rain and darkness to find that sheep. He fends off wolves and outruns thieves. He protects his sheep at the cost of his own life. And when he finds the lost lambs, he hoists them on his shoulders and carries them home, that there may be one flock and one shepherd. The Good Shepherd is here that we may have life and have it abundantly. And he will not rest until all the sheep, every last one of us, are safe within the fold. After making her rounds with the sheep on Easter Day, Scottish farmer Mel goes back to the barn to check on the severely dehydrated lamb she'd fed and left in the camper van to get warm. She's expecting him to be dying. She opens the door with dread to find the lamb standing up, looking around curiously and starting to walk. "My baby," she cries. "He's alive!" Within a few days, he's leaping around the pen with the other pet lambs. The one who was rejected and pushed away has been brought into the fold. The Good Shepherd has done her work. That is why she is there, that all the sheep may have life and have it abundantly.